Evelyn, don't embarrass us tonight.
By telling the truth?
By remembering your place.
My place, or the version of me you invented.
The version that doesn't ruin everything.
So I'm only acceptable when I'm invisible?
You're acceptable when you don't make people uncomfortable.
My mother smiled and said, "Please don't embarrass us tonight." So I nodded and let her lie about my life in front of everyone. But what she didn't know was, the man she was trying to impress already knew exactly who I was. My name is Evelyn Foster. I'm 34 years old, and I make a living exposing lies powerful people hope never see daylight. And yet, the hardest lie I've ever had to sit through was at my own family's dinner table. It started at 2:07 a.m. My phone lit up in the dark, vibrating against the wooden nightstand beside my bed in my small Boston apartment. The kind of call that never brings good news. I grabbed it, heart already racing. "Evelyn?" My mother's voice came through, tight, controlled, already irritated. "Linda Foster, 58, impeccably put together at all times. Short, styled blonde hair, pearl earrings even at breakfast, posture always straight like she was performing for an invisible audience. She had spent her entire life curating appearances. Not truth, just what looked good. "You're coming to dinner Friday," she said. Not a question. I sat up slowly. "Dinner?" "Daniel's fiancé's parents are coming. It's important." Daniel Foster, my younger brother, 30, 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with an easy smile that made strangers trust him instantly. He had this relaxed charm, like life never pushed too hard against him. Growing up, he learned quickly that being agreeable got him praised. Avoiding conflict kept him safe, and somewhere along the way, that turned into a habit of letting things slide, even when they shouldn't. "What do you need me there for?" I asked. There was a pause. Then my mother exhaled sharply. "You need to behave," she said. "And for once, Evelyn, keep things simple." Simple. I already knew what that meant. From the background, I heard my father's voice, soft, distant. Richard Foster, 62, slightly hunched posture from years behind a desk, thinning grey hair, always holding a newspaper like a shield. A man who had mastered the art of disappearing inside his own home. "Just let her come, Linda," he murmured. "Stay out of it," my mother snapped. Then back to me, colder now. "Her father is a senior partner at Harrison & Cole. Do you understand what that means?" she said. "These are not people you start talking to about your cases." My jaw tightened. "I'm a financial investigations attorney. I build cases that dismantle fraud networks, take down executives, and drag buried corruption into the open. I've testified in federal hearings. I've put men in prison. But in my mother's version of reality, I was too much." "So what do you want me to say?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Just tell them you work in an office," she said quickly. "Administrative work, nothing complicated." I closed my eyes. 34 years old, and still being edited. "I'm not lying about my career," I said quietly. A sharp laugh cut through the line. "Oh please, Evelyn, not everything needs to be a statement. This dinner is about your brother. Don't make it about you for once." There it was, the script. I looked around my apartment, the stacks of legal files on my kitchen counter, my laptop still open with case notes glowing faintly on the screen. Evidence of a life I built piece by piece, without anyone in that house ever truly seeing it. And suddenly, I was 7 again, standing in our old living room in Connecticut, staring at the family photo wall, 6 frames, 5 of Daniel, 1 of me, mine slightly tilted, half-shadowed by a decorative plant. I had fixed it once. The next day, it was moved back. That was the first time I learned something important. In my family, visibility was not accidental. It was controlled. "Fine," I said finally. The word tasted like surrender. "Good," my mother replied immediately, relief slipping into her voice. "We'll see you Friday." The call ended. I sat there in the silence, staring at the reflection of myself in the dark window. Evelyn Foster, attorney, investigator, the woman who built cases strong enough to collapse entire companies, and somehow, still the daughter who had to shrink to be allowed in the room. Friday came faster than I expected. The Foster house looked exactly the same. White siding, perfect lawn, everything neat, controlled, curated, just like her. When I stepped inside, my mother barely looked at me before adjusting a napkin on the dining table. "Remember," she said softly, not even turning around. "Keep it simple." Across the room, my father gave me a small nod, sympathetic but distant. Daniel walked in from the kitchen, smiling like everything was normal. "Hey, Ev," he said, easy, casual, like this wasn't a setup, like I wasn't being asked to disappear again. I forced a smile back, because for one night, I told myself I could handle it. I didn't know yet. This was the night everything would break. I didn't sleep much after that call. Instead, I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying a version of my life I had tried for years to outgrow, but never really escaped. Because this wasn't new. It never was. It started long before Boston, long before law school, long before I learned how to dismantle a lie in a courtroom. It started in our living room in Connecticut. I was 8 the first time I noticed the pattern clearly. The wall above the fireplace held our family story. 6 framed photos in a perfect row. My mother curated them like a gallery exhibit. Daniel in a Little League uniform, grinning with dirt on his cheeks. Daniel holding a participation trophy like it was Olympic gold. Daniel at church, hands folded, looking like the kind of boy people trusted immediately. Then there was me. 1 photo, slightly smaller frame, pushed a few inches off-center. I remember standing on a chair, adjusting it, moving mine closer to the middle, aligning it evenly with the others. For a moment, it felt right, balanced. The next day, it was back where it had been. Not broken, not removed, just corrected. Linda Foster didn't yell. She didn't scold. That wasn't her style. She edited. Daniel didn't notice it the way I did, at least not then. At 10 years old, he was already tall for his age, broad in the shoulders, with sandy brown hair that never quite stayed in place. He laughed easily, talked easily. Teachers loved him. Parents trusted him. He didn't try to take up space, he just naturally filled it. And when our mother looked at him, it was like she saw confirmation that she had done everything right. "Daniel's got leadership energy," she would say to neighbors, smiling in that polished way of hers. "You can just tell." I stood beside her once, holding a certificate from a regional academic competition. First place. She didn't mention it, not because she forgot, because it didn't fit the story. The first time it really sank in was during middle school. I had spent weeks preparing for a state-level academic decathlon. Late nights, stacks of flashcards, entire weekends buried in textbooks. I remember the exact moment they called my name. First place. I stood on that stage, hands shaking, heart pounding, not from fear, but from hope. Maybe this time. Maybe this was big enough. When I got home, my mother was in the kitchen, arranging flowers like she always did. White lilies, perfectly spaced. "I won," I said. She didn't turn around immediately, just adjusted a stem, tilted her head slightly. "That's nice," she replied. "Daniel has a scrimmage tomorrow. Make sure you're back early so we can all go support him." That was it. No questions, no follow-up, no pride, just redirect. It wasn't that she hated me. That would have been easier to understand. Linda Foster didn't reject me. She minimized me. Because I didn't match the version of motherhood she wanted to present. A son who was charming, visible, easy to explain. A daughter who asked questions, challenged things, pursued uncomfortable truths. That didn't photograph well. By high school, I had learned the rules. Don't talk too long about your achievements. Don't correct the narrative. Don't make things complicated. I remember sitting at the dinner table once while my mother told guests that Daniel was
already being scouted for major opportunities. He wasn't. He was decent at sports, not exceptional. I opened my mouth to clarify. Then I saw the look she gave me. Subtle, sharp, a warning. And I closed it. That was the moment I realized something that would follow me into adulthood. In this house, truth was negotiable. Image was not. So I adapted. I made myself smaller, quieter, easier to place at the edge of the frame. Not invisible, just less visible than him. Because somewhere along the way, I started to believe that was the cost of belonging.
By the time I moved to Boston, I had already mastered the art of living two lives. The version my family believed in, quiet, unremarkable, easy to summarize, and the one I actually built. Boston didn't feel like home at first. It felt sharp, fast, demanding. But I fit into it in a way I never had anywhere else. My apartment was small, one bedroom, exposed brick, a narrow kitchen counter always covered in case files. But it was mine. And more importantly, my work was mine. I worked at Kensington & Rowe, a boutique legal firm known for taking on high-level financial fraud cases. The kind that involved shell companies, hidden accounts, and executives who smiled for cameras while moving millions in the dark. That was where I came alive. My supervisor, Margaret Ellison, was the first person who ever looked at me and saw exactly what I was capable of. 55, tall, lean, always in tailored navy suits, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a low, precise bun. She had a reputation for dismantling billion-dollar fraud schemes without raising her voice once. People didn't fear her because she was loud. They feared her because she was always right. "You don't just find evidence," she told me once, standing beside me in the conference room, reviewing a stack of financial records. "You see patterns before they exist. That's rare." That was the closest thing to pride I had ever heard directed at me, and it came from someone who didn't owe it to me. The case I was working on now was the biggest of my career. A financial firm called Redmont Capital, clean branding, polished executives, charitable donations splashed across their website. But underneath it, something didn't add up. Money moved too cleanly, too quietly. We had started pulling records 6 months ago. Now we were close. Late nights turned into early mornings. Coffee became routine. I spent hours tracking transactions across offshore accounts, connecting dots that were never meant to be seen together. And every time a piece clicked into place, I felt it. That quiet, undeniable certainty. This matters. One night, just after midnight, I finally found it. A sequence of transfers, small amounts, repeated, layered through multiple accounts, individually harmless. Together, fraud. I leaned back in my chair, heart steady but sharp, staring at the screen. This was the break. The kind of evidence that didn't just raise questions, it ended conversations. I printed everything, organized it, cross-referenced it. By 2 a.m., I had built a structure strong enough to hold in court. The next morning, Margaret reviewed my work in silence. No interruptions, no comments, just that focused, surgical attention. Then she closed the folder. "This," she said calmly, "is what wins cases." She looked at me directly. "You're the strongest investigator on this team, Evelyn. Don't forget that." I nodded, but something in my chest tightened instead of lifting, because there was only one place I had ever wanted to hear something like that, and I already knew I never would. That night, I almost called my mother. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, staring at her contact name on the screen. I imagined how it would go. "Mom, I just cracked a major fraud case. The firm is building everything around my findings." I imagined a pause. Then, "That's nice, Evelyn. Did you hear Daniel might be closing a big deal this week?" Or worse, silence. I had tried before, 3 years ago, when I made partner track faster than anyone in my cohort. I called, excited, nervous, hopeful. She cut me off halfway through. "Evelyn, honey, I'm in the middle of something. Can we talk later? Daniel just got back from a showing." We never did. So this time, I didn't press call. I set the phone down and let the moment pass, because I had finally learned something that took me years to accept. It wasn't that they didn't hear me. It was that they chose not to.
By the time Friday got closer, I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. Not the version my mother presented to the world, but the real one. Daniel Foster, my younger brother, was 30. Tall, naturally athletic, with that same easy smile he'd had since he was a kid. The kind of smile that made people lean in, trust him, give him the benefit of the doubt before he even said a word. But there was something else now. Something quieter. Tired. I noticed it the last time I saw him in person, 6 months ago, at a rushed family brunch. He had laughed at all the right moments, nodded along when our mother exaggerated his achievements, but his eyes didn't follow the script as easily anymore. Back then, I didn't think much of it. Now, I did. Daniel didn't work in finance. He didn't manage investments. He wasn't a rising executive, no matter how many times my mother said it out loud. He worked at a mid-sized real estate office just outside Hartford. Sales. Commission-based. Long hours. Unstable income. Endless pressure to perform. There was nothing wrong with that. Except in my mother's world, it wasn't enough. I found the first crack in her story by accident. 2 nights before the dinner, I was scrolling through social media, half distracted, half trying to quiet my mind before sleep. Then I saw it. My mother's post. A photo of Daniel in a suit, clean, confident, standing in front of a modern glass building. So proud of my son, Daniel Foster, Senior Investment Director, closing another major deal this week. Hard work always pays off. I stared at the caption for a long moment. Then I zoomed in on the photo. The building behind him wasn't a corporate office. It was a staged property listing. I recognized it, because 2 weeks ago I had reviewed documents tied to that exact address in a financing case. That's when it hit me. This wasn't occasional exaggeration anymore. This was construction. An entire identity, built piece by piece, post by post, until it became something people accepted without question. Claire Harrison was one of those people. Daniel's fiancée. 28, medium height, slim build, with dark brown hair she usually wore pulled back in a low ponytail. There was something steady about her. Observant eyes, calm voice, the kind of presence that didn't rush to fill silence. She worked as a nurse practitioner at a private clinic in Boston. Practical, grounded, direct, and not easily fooled. I met her once, briefly. She had asked me a simple question. "So, what do you do in Boston?" Before I could answer, my mother stepped in. "Evelyn does some administrative work," she said lightly. Claire had looked at me, not confused, not convinced, just noticing. Now, looking at that post again, I wondered how much Claire had already started to question. Because people like her didn't ignore inconsistencies. They collected them. Quietly. Later that night, Daniel called me. That alone was unusual. "Hey," he said, voice low. "You coming Friday?" "I am." A pause. Then he exhaled slowly. "Just try to keep things smooth, okay?" There it was. Not a demand, not quite an apology either. More like a warning wrapped in hesitation. "Smooth for who?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. "For Mum," he said finally. Of course. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, phone pressed to my ear. "Do you even recognize yourself in what she says about you?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "I mean, it's not that far off," he muttered. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. That quiet negotiation with reality. The same one I had learned to survive. "You know it's not true," I said. "Yeah," he admitted. "But it's easier this way." Easier. The word settled between us like something fragile and dangerous. After the call ended, I went back to the post, read the caption again. Then I noticed something else. Comments. Dozens of them. Congratulations, impressive, you must be so proud. And right there, Claire's comment. So proud of you. No questions, no corrections, but no enthusiasm either, just polite, measured. I stared at it for a long time, because for the first time, I realized something important. I wasn't the only one being edited. Daniel was too. The difference was, he had agreed to it. The house smelled like rosemary and polished wood when I stepped inside. My mother had outdone herself. The dining table stretched longer than I remembered, covered in a crisp white cloth, every plate aligned with exact precision. Crystal glasses caught the light like they were part of a display, not meant to be touched. It wasn't a dinner. It was a performance. And we all had assigned roles. Linda Foster stood at the center of it all, moving with quiet authority. Her navy dress was tailored perfectly, her posture straight, chin slightly lifted. Every movement deliberate, every detail controlled. "Evelyn, you'll sit there," she said, pointing to the far end of the table without looking at me. Of course, edge of the frame. Richard Foster was already seated when I walked in. He held a folded newspaper in his lap, even though he wasn't reading it. 62, thinning grey hair, shoulders slightly curved inward, like he had spent years making himself smaller in the presence of louder personalities. He glanced up at me, gave a brief nod. No words, just acknowledgement. That was his version of support. Daniel stood near the kitchen entrance, adjusting his cuff like he wasn't sure what to do with his hands. He looked good. Dark suit, clean lines, confident posture. But I could see the tension in the small details. The way his jaw tightened when our mother spoke. The way he avoided eye contact for a fraction too long. "Hey," he said when I approached, voice low. "Hey." We didn't say more. There wasn't space for real conversations here. Claire arrived first. She stepped into the room with quiet composure, cream-coloured dress, minimal makeup, her dark hair loosely tied back. She smiled easily, but her eyes moved quickly, taking everything in, observing. That was new. "Evelyn," she said, walking toward me with a genuine warmth that caught me off guard. "It's good to see you again." "You too." She hesitated for a moment, then asked, "So, how's Boston treating you?" There it was. A real question. I opened my mouth. "I told Claire you've been keeping busy with office work." My mother's voice cut in smoothly as she appeared beside us, placing a hand lightly on Claire's arm. "Nothing too stressful. She's always preferred something more stable." The sentence landed like it had been rehearsed. Claire's eyes flicked to mine. Not confused, not convinced, just noting the mismatch. "I see," she said softly. The second set of guests arrived 10 minutes later. Mr. Harrison walked in first. Tall, late 60s, silver hair combed back neatly, posture straight in a way that suggested discipline rather than vanity. His presence was quiet, but it carried weight. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. Behind him was his wife, Margaret Harrison, early 60s, elegant in a soft grey dress, her expression calm but attentive. She stood close to him, but her gaze moved independently, sharp in its own right. They weren't just guests, they were evaluators. Dinner began smoothly. Too smoothly. My mother guided the conversation like she was conducting an orchestra, directing attention, redirecting questions, controlling tempo. "Daniel's been handling some major investment portfolios lately," she said casually, pouring wine. His firm relies on him heavily. Daniel nodded slightly. Didn't correct her, didn't confirm either, just allowed it. Every time the conversation drifted toward me, it was redirected. Evelyn, could you pass the bread? Evelyn, would you mind checking the kitchen? Evelyn, make sure everyone has water. Tasks, movement, distraction, removal. Claire tried again halfway through dinner. So, Evelyn, she said, turning toward me fully this time, her tone more deliberate. What kind of projects are you working on lately? There it was again. An opening. A chance. I felt it rise in my chest. It's mostly routine, my mother interrupted lightly, smiling as she set down her glass. Nothing that would interest you. Claire deals with real-world stress every day in healthcare. A soft laugh, a shift of attention. Conversation redirected. I didn't speak again for a while. Not because I couldn't, because I was watching. Mr. Harrison hadn't said much, but he hadn't missed anything either. His eyes moved quietly from person to person, but they returned to me more than once. Not casually, not vaguely, intentionally. Like he was trying to place something, or someone. Margaret Harrison noticed it too. At one point, she glanced between her husband and me, her brow tightening slightly, not in confusion, but recognition waiting to form. Across the table, my father kept his eyes on his plate, cutting food, chewing slowly, avoiding everything that might require him to choose a side. And Daniel, he was shrinking. Not visibly, not obviously, but I could see it, in the silence, in the way he stopped correcting anything at all. And sitting there, at the far edge of the table, I realized something with complete clarity. This wasn't just about hiding me. This was about maintaining a story. And every person at that table was being asked to play their part.
The shift didn't happen loudly. It happened in a pause. A small, almost invisible break in the rhythm of the dinner. Mr. Harrison set his glass down. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just deliberately. The soft sound of crystal touching wood cut through my mother's voice mid-sentence. And Daniel has been overseeing multiple investment portfolios. Silence followed, not complete silence, but the kind that pulls attention whether people want it to or not. Thomas Harrison turned slightly in his chair. Late 60s, composed, controlled. His presence wasn't about dominance, it was about certainty. The kind built from years of making decisions that carried consequences. His eyes moved from my mother to me and stayed there. I apologize, he said calmly, but I believe we've met before. My mother let out a light laugh, too quick, too sharp. Oh, I don't think so. Evelyn doesn't really... Yes, he interrupted gently, without raising his voice. But I'm quite certain we have. Something tightened in my chest, because I knew exactly where. A courtroom in Boston, 6 months ago. You were sitting 3 rows behind counsel, he continued, still looking directly at me, taking notes, not for the firm, but for the case itself. Every eye at the table shifted, toward me. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't have one, but because for the first time that night, no one was interrupting me. Yes, I said finally. I was. My mother leaned forward slightly, her smile tightening. Evelyn has always been interested in legal topics. She reads a lot. She wasn't reading, Mr. Harrison said, still calm, still precise. She was leading the investigation. The room changed, not physically, but undeniably. Claire's posture straightened. Her eyes widened, not dramatically, not theatrically, but with the kind of realization that rearranges everything you thought you understood. She was... What? Claire asked quietly. Mr. Harrison didn't look at her. He kept his attention on me. You're Evelyn Foster, he said. Kensington and Row, the Redmont capital case. It wasn't a question, It was a confirmation. I nodded once. Yes, Claire inhaled sharply, not out of shock alone, but recognition. I read about that case, she said slowly, her voice more focused now. That investigation exposed a multi-layered fraud network. It was all over the legal journals. Her gaze shifted fully to me. You did that? Before I could respond, no, my mother cut in quickly. That's not what she does. There must be some confusion. There isn't, Mr. Harrison said, finally turning his head toward her. Not harsh, not aggressive, but final. She built the foundation of that case, he continued. Her work was cited multiple times during the proceedings. My mother's composure cracked, just slightly, a flicker in her eyes, a pause too long. That's exaggerated, she said, forcing a smile. Evelyn tends to... I don't, I said, quiet, clear. The words settled into the space like something solid, unmovable. Across the table, Daniel shifted in his seat. Not dramatically, but enough. Mr. Harrison's gaze moved to him next. And you, he said calmly, your mother mentioned you manage investment portfolios. Daniel froze. Just for a second. Then my mother spoke again, faster now. He's very modest. He doesn't like to talk about... Daniel, Mr. Harrison said, not raising his voice, but cutting cleanly through hers. What is your actual position? The room held its breath. Daniel looked down at his plate. His hands tightened slightly around his fork, then loosened. I'm in real estate, he said. The words came out low, flat. My mother let out a soft, strained laugh. Well, technically, I sell properties, he added, more clearly this time. Another shift, heavier. Claire leaned back slightly in her chair, her eyes moving between Daniel and me, between the truth and everything she had been told. You're not in investment management, she asked. Daniel shook his head. No. Silence followed, real silence this time. My mother tried once more. This isn't how it sounds. It sounds exactly like what it is, Claire said quietly. Not angry, not emotional, just certain. And for the first time that night, my mother had no version of the story ready. I sat there, at the far end of the table, in the same seat she had placed me in, to keep me out of the way, and realized something I hadn't expected. I hadn't broken anything. I had just stopped holding it together.
The silence didn't shatter. It settled. Heavy. Unavoidable. Like something that had been waiting years to finally land. Claire Harrison was the first to move. She placed her napkin down carefully beside her plate, fingers steady, but her eyes were no longer soft. The calm warmth she had carried into the room was gone, replaced by something sharper, clearer. She turned to Daniel. You knew, she said. Not loud, not accusatory, just precise. Daniel looked up slowly. His face had lost all its colour. The easy confidence he wore like armour earlier was gone. In its place was something exposed, raw, uncertain. I didn't lie, he said quickly. I just didn't correct it. Claire blinked once. That's not better. My mother leaned forward, panic finally breaking through her composure. Claire, sweetheart, this is all a misunderstanding. Families, sometimes we exaggerate a little. It's harmless. It's not harmless, Claire said, turning to her now. For the first time, there was steel in her voice. She sat straighter, shoulders squared, not aggressive, but grounded. You didn't just exaggerate, she continued. You erased one child and rewrote another. And you expected both of them to play along. The words landed harder than anything said so far, because they were accurate. Daniel flinched, not visibly, but enough. This isn't about Evelyn, my mother insisted, her voice rising slightly now. This is about protecting the family. No, Claire cut in. This is about control. That word hung in the air longer than anything else. Control. Daniel stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is getting out of hand, he said, running a hand through his hair. Claire, we can talk about this later. When? She asked. After the wedding. After more lies. He didn't answer, because there wasn't one. I need to know who I'm marrying, Claire continued, her voice quieter now, but firmer. And I don't think I do. My mother shook her head rapidly. You're overreacting. This is just dinner. Emotions are high. Claire reached for her ring and slid it off. The movement was small, but final. I'm not overreacting, she said. I'm responding. She placed the ring gently on the table, right in front of Daniel. Something broke then. Not loudly, but completely. Daniel stared at the ring like it didn't belong there, like it couldn't possibly be real. This is because of her, he said suddenly, turning towards me. The words came out sharp, defensive, immediate, and familiar. You couldn't just stay quiet for one night, he added. You had to make it about you. I didn't flinch. Not this time. I didn't say anything, I replied calmly. I just didn't lie. That stopped him, just for a second, because somewhere underneath everything, he knew it was true. Richard Foster shifted in his chair, slowly, deliberately. For the first time that night, he spoke. Daniel, he said quietly. His voice wasn't strong, but it carried. This isn't her fault. Everyone turned, because that had never happened before. He looked at my mother then, really looked at her. You pushed this too far, Linda. The room stilled, again, but differently this time. My mother's expression faltered just slightly, like something inside her had slipped out of place. I was trying to help him, she said weakly. At what cost? My father asked. No one answered. Claire picked up her coat. I'm leaving, she said simply. She paused beside me on her way out, just for a moment. I'm sorry, she said quietly, for believing a version of you that wasn't real. I nodded once. That makes two of us. Then she walked out, and the front door closed behind her. Daniel didn't follow. He just stood there, staring at the space where everything had just fallen apart. I stood up slowly, placed my napkin beside my plate. I'm not doing this anymore, I said. My mother looked at me, eyes wide now, not angry, not controlling, just unsure. You don't get to shrink me to fit your version of a perfect family, I continued. Not tonight. Not ever again. I picked up my coat, walked past the table, past the carefully arranged plates, past the version of myself I had spent years trying to survive. No one stopped me, and for the first time, I didn't wait to be asked back. Later that night, as I drove back towards Boston, my phone buzzed once. A message from Claire. You told the truth. I respect that. I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner. I read it once, then again, and for the first time that night, something inside me felt steady. The silence after that night didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space. For 3 weeks, no one from home called. No messages from my mother. No updates from Daniel. Just quiet. The kind that forces things to settle where they actually belong. I threw myself back into work. Redmond Capital moved forward faster than expected. With the evidence finalised, the case began drawing attention across legal circles. Internal briefings turned into external interest. That's how I met Dr. Alan Pierce. 50, tall, slightly stooped posture from years of lecturing, wire-rimmed glasses that constantly slid down his nose. He was a professor of financial law at Columbia, known for turning complex fraud cases into teaching frameworks. He approached me after a panel discussion I had been invited to attend. "You're Evelyn Foster," he said, studying me carefully. "The Redmond investigation." I nodded. "I'd like you to speak at our annual symposium," he continued. "Young attorneys need to understand how real cases are built, not just how they look on paper." It wasn't just recognition. It was validation. From the kind of world my family had always dismissed. A week later, I stood on stage in New York, lights overhead, a room full of legal professionals watching, and for the first time, I spoke without editing myself. After the talk, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. I started therapy. That was it. No explanation, no defense, just a statement. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back. "That's a start?" He called me 2 days later. His voice sounded different, less certain, but more honest. "I didn't realize how much I was letting her control everything," he admitted. "It was just easier to go along with it." I leaned back in my chair, listening. "That doesn't make it right," I said. "I know," he replied. "That's why I'm trying to fix it." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it wasn't empty either. My father texted occasionally, short messages. "Hope you're doing well. Saw your name mentioned in an article." Simple, but consistent. For him, that was change. My mother didn't reach out until the 6th week. Her name appeared on my phone one afternoon while I was reviewing documents. I let it ring twice before answering. "Evelyn?" Her voice was softer than I had ever heard it. No control, no performance. "I don't know how to say this properly," she began. That alone told me everything had shifted. "I was wrong," she said. The words came slowly, like they had weight. "I cared too much about how things looked, and not enough about who you actually are." I didn't respond immediately, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because for the first time, she was saying something real. "I thought if everything looked perfect," she continued, "then it would be enough." A pause. It wasn't. I exhaled slowly. "No," I said. "It wasn't." Another pause. Then, "Would you come by this weekend?" she asked. "No dinner, no guests, just us." I didn't answer right away, not because I was unsure, but because this time I was choosing. "Okay," I said finally, "but things are different now." "I know," she replied, and for once, it sounded like she meant it. When I walked into the house that Saturday, the first thing I noticed wasn't the table. It was the wall. The photos were still there, same frames, same arrangement, but one thing had changed. Mine was in the center, not adjusted slightly, not half hidden, not corrected later. Centered, visible. Daniel stood beside it when I walked in. Casual clothes, no performance, no tension in his posture. He gave me a small smile. "Looks better this way," he said. "It does," I replied. My mother stood in the doorway to the kitchen, watching, not directing, not correcting. "Do you want coffee?" she asked. A simple question, normal, unscripted. I nodded, and for the first time in that house, I didn't feel like I had to shrink to stay. Because I wasn't sitting at the edge anymore. I had my seat, and this time, I chose it. If you were me, would you stay silent to protect your family, or tell the truth and risk losing everything? If you were me, would you choose peace, or choose self-respect? And Daniel, if you were me, would you forgive him, or walk away for good? If you were me, what would you do? Comment below. If this story hit you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories.